Hi, good day to Dr. Amelia. My name is Kevin Tang Hung Yung, and I'm presenting for the course PLG 749, Teaching and Researching Autonomy in Language Learning. So I'm going to present a topic entitled Online Language Learning and Learner Autonomy, a comparative review. So I've chosen two articles to present. So first I will do a brief summary on the first article, and then the brief summary on the second article, and last part is the comparison between both articles, the strengths and weaknesses. Alright, so now I will move on to the first article. So the title of the first article is Promotion of Learner Autonomy Within the Framework of a Flipped EFL Instructional Model, Perception and Perspectives. This is written by Ye Rusai and published in 2021. So now the summary of the first article begins. So as with acquiring any new knowledge, learning a language will not just happen by itself. It requires studious application, most of which occurs outside the classroom. So there is evidence and research to support the notion that development of LA, which is the learner autonomy, is positively related to the target language, any kind of languages, proficiency. So learner autonomy was defined by McCaskill and Taylor in 2010 as learners taking responsibility for their own learning, being motivated to learn, gaining pleasure from their learning, managing their time well, planning effectively, and displaying perseverance when encountering difficulties. So autonomous language learning outside the classroom is frequently mediated by a plethora of technological tools and resources. The accessibility, convenience, and ubiquity of technology-mediated instruction can support more autonomous learning. So these are the research that say technology and also learner autonomy, they are connected to each other. There are relationship between these two. So this part is the background knowledge and the problem statement of the study. There are three research questions for this article. What are the differences in perceived learner autonomy between the experimental group and the control group before and after the instruction? What are the differences in perceived learner autonomy of the experimental group before and after the flipped instruction? Number 3, to what extent have the learners changed their autonomous behavior after the intervention of the flipped instruction? So from the title, I cannot tell whether this research or this article is qualitative or quantitative in nature, because when I read the title it says perspectives and perceptions. To me, perspectives and perceptions, they are more qualitative in nature, but then when I read the research questions sound more quantitative in nature. And maybe it's mixed method because of the third question, which can be qualitative. So my point is that, my critique is that if this is quantitative or even mixed method, then it should be revealed in the title itself. All the variables should be appear in the title, so now because due to the time constraint, I skip literature part. But my comment for the literature part is that it is well organized and it is well written. All the variables, all the terms are mentioned. So I think it is quite well written. So now let's move on to the methodology part. The participants, so 2 classes of English majors enrolled in a linguistic course in a Taiwanese university. So there are 131 students enrolled. Only 124 were included in this study. Okay, their average age of the students' average age is 20 years old. So there are two groups. So first group is experimental group. So there are 18 males and 46 females. The control group has 19 males and 41 females. So from here we know that males, there are lesser males than females. Okay, less than like half. Okay, researcher was the instructor of the experimental group. Okay, and for the control group, it was taught by another professor. Okay, so please pay attention to this statement. Researcher was the instructor of the experimental group. Okay, as far as I know, if the researcher himself or herself is the instructor, is the teacher of the research, or involved directly in the research, this is improper. Okay, it will cause data bias afterward. Okay, so this is my critique on this participant part. Okay, so all participants had studied English for at least 7 years in secondary school, so for sure the English level is higher. 15 from the EG experimental group voluntarily participated in the interview. Okay, 7 males and 8 females. Okay, alright, so let's go to the next one. Course design. Principles of the flipped classroom instruction. Okay, so basically this study, it follows this principles of the flipped classroom instruction. Okay, so this is by the researcher is following the illustration of Yarbrough et al. 2014. Okay, which mentioned that there are 4 major components in this FC instruction: flexible environment, learning culture, intentional content, professional educator. Okay, so flexible environment is described as blended. In this study, okay, in this particular study, for the flexible environment, the researcher employed blended learning environment, or he or she tried to create a blended learning environment, okay, with the support of Moodle CMS. Okay, that means the researcher used this Moodle CMS in the blended learning class environment. Okay, learning culture, the second element, learning culture. In this research, okay, the researcher used rich digital resources and designed activities for the students. Okay, intentional content, the third element. Okay, the researcher used video films created by the teacher, okay, and also that took online resources. Okay, professional educator. Okay, so this fourth element, in this study, who are the professional educators? Just now I've already mentioned the researcher himself or herself, and also another professor. So they are the instructors who monitored the students' learning progress, modified the teaching style, okay, provide feedback to the students, and also assess the students' learning output. So this is basically the principles or the model followed by the researcher. Okay, so for the experimental group, okay, the researcher basically come up with this model and name it model of the flipped classroom. So this is based on the FC instruction just now. Okay, so we can see here before class, so the instructor will give teaching materials. Okay, we'll select the teaching materials and then provide PPT, okay, and then give a mini lecture or lectures for 10 to 15 minutes and give worksheets. Okay, provide worksheets to the students. Okay, in the CMS, students will have to preview the textbook. Okay, that means they have to read the textbook before they come to the class. This is before class, the class, okay? And they have to preview PPT done by the teacher or professor, and also preview mini lectures. Okay, and then in the class, the instructor has to highlight the main points. Okay, this is in the class, and also he or she has to guide group discussions among the students. So in the CMS course management system, students will have to do worksheet discussion, do hands-on activities, and also presentation of the answers to Q&A. Okay, so after the class, after the students went home, the instructor will have to give feedback on e-journals. The students will have to do their e-journals, and then the instructor will have to give feedback. Okay, and then the instructors have to do assessment. Okay, and also instructors have to do online activities review. Okay, so in the CMS, students have to do online quizzes, they have to do e-journals, and they have to do review, the activities review. Okay, so for the control group, this is non-flipped classroom instruction. So this control group, since that they are not following the FC instruction, they only receive a lecture-based instruction with the same textbook and teaching materials, okay, but they do not have any online sessions after school, after class. Okay, so the three major differences between the experimental group and the control group are: number one, there are no out-of-class materials or activities for the control group. The control group had a different learning culture, okay, which means everything is based on the teacher. The teacher is the leader, is the guider, is the facilitator. Okay, so everything is teacher. Students have no voice. Okay, so it is based on teacher-centered approach. In class time activities, students have to do work on textbook exercises, and then they would randomly be selected to present their answers. Okay, so this is a very conventional type of English lessons. Okay, teachers will teach, and then students will do their homework in a textbook or activity book, and then they will discuss the answer. Okay, maybe the teacher will provide the answer, or students will have to present their answers. Very conventional. Okay, for the instrument, there are two. The first one is questionnaire. Okay, questionnaire on learners' perception of learning autonomy. It is adapted from the version used in Samprasat 2010. The questionnaire contained 5 constructs. Okay, the first one is learner autonomous strategy. The second construct is learner autonomous behavior. The third construct is learner independence. Fourth construct is learner confidence. And the last construct is characteristics of autonomous learners. So these 5 items were incorporated into 5-point Likert scale, with 1 be the lowest, be the strongly disagree, and 5 be the strongly agree. So the second instrument is the students' e-journal. So students' learning e-journals were collected for data analysis. The documentation of learners' thinking and learning processes was expected to provide information about learners' perception, belief, and behavior related to learner autonomy. In each journal, the students were required to answer 2 questions. Okay, question 1 and question 2. Question 1 was concerned with the compliance of learning outcome, while question 2 dealt with learning attitude, autonomy, discipline, and opinion about learning materials and activities. Students' e-journals were analyzed to find regularities or common patterns across student responses. A coding system was developed by the researcher based on Samprasat 2010 and Tassinari 2012. Okay, so after all this, the researcher carried out a retrospective interview. Okay, so the interview is to investigate the participants' opinions about their learning experiences before and after the intervention, their comments on the flipped classroom, as well as any suggestions to improve the course. It helped clarify ambiguous information which could not be revealed in the questionnaire. So it is sort of like a triangulation in data collection aside from the quantitative method. The interviews were conducted and sound recorded in Chinese because all these students are from Taiwan. They are Chinese, the Taiwanese Chinese, okay, which were transcribed afterwards for further analysis. So the procedure of data collection, both courses in EG, experimental group, and control group were offered for 3 hours per week and lasted for 18 weeks. Okay, 18 weeks, roughly 4 to 5 months. Yeah, the same English version questionnaire on perceived learner autonomy was administered twice to the experimental group and control group before and after the instruction during week 1 and week 17 respectively. Okay, so week 1 they will be given the questionnaire, and then week 17 the second time. Okay, the interviews were arranged with 15 interviewees in accordance with the time when they were available during week 17 and 18. Okay, so the interview was done in week 17 and 18. Each interview took place in an office within the department and lasted 15 to 30 minutes. So during the first session of the course, the students were notified that they were participating in an experimental course, and the survey would include data collected from their e-journals, activity records on the CMS, a questionnaire, and interviews. Okay, so the students were well notified. They were told that any data they provided for the project would remain confidential and be treated anonymously. Okay, anonymously. Okay, so now I will move on to result and discussion. Okay, so the comparison between the pre and post questionnaire on perceived learner autonomy showed no difference between the groups prior to instruction. However, significant statistical differences were found between the groups following instruction, especially in the constructs of learner autonomous strategy, learner behavior, and learner confidence. Okay, so in short, before the intervention, okay, none of the groups show any differences. Okay, there is no difference between the EG and the CG. Okay, but after the intervention, so it is tested to have statistical significant differences between EG and CG. Okay, so especially in the construct of learner autonomous strategy, learner behavior, and also learner confidence. Okay, so the examination of e-journals revealed that learner autonomy had been improved in terms of strategy use, behavior, interaction with the materials, and use of social resources, and self-management of learning. Okay, so remember, e-journals were written by the students. Okay, so these e-journals revealed that the students' learner autonomy had actually improved. Okay, in terms of all this. Okay, so CMS log analysis showed significant correlations between online learning activities and perceived learner autonomy. Okay, so but for this point, I would like to critique a little bit. Okay, we do not see any correlation being mentioned in the title or being mentioned in the research questions, but suddenly in the discussion part you can see this correlation being discussed. Okay, so I think if the researcher wants to put this or want to incorporate this correlation in this study, then it should be properly mentioned in the title or in the at least in the research questions. Yeah. And also, furthermore, the data collected from the pre and post questionnaires, e-journal, and interviews were analyzed and interpreted to explain the fostered learner autonomy from psychological, technical, social, cultural, and political critical perspectives. Okay? So now I move on to the second article entitled Foreign Language Learner Autonomy in Online Learning Environments, the Teacher's Perspectives. Okay, so this is written by Christian Ludwig and Maria Giovanna in 2023. Okay, so the first article focuses more on the learners themselves. Okay, but the second article, it focuses more on the teachers. Yeah. Okay, so in response to the COVID-19 outbreak, many teachers at all educational levels had to suddenly teach classes online. As researchers and practitioners in the field of foreign language learner autonomy, the researchers were interested in investigating the impact of this sudden switch to online teaching and learning autonomy, fostering practices, and in particular, in finding out how teachers perceived and dealt with opportunities and challenges in this unexpected situation. The relationship between learner and teacher autonomy and online language learning, or technology in language learning, has been defined as a close but uneasy relationship. Okay, they have close relationship, but it is described as uneasy. Okay, so online learning environments may consistently vary in their designs, constraints, and opportunities, provide more or less scaffolding or spaces for social learning, thus enhancing or requiring different components of autonomy. The research questions for this article are: how does the sudden move to online teaching influence the promotion of learner autonomy? Which new roles do teachers and learners assume in online learning environments? How do these changes impact teacher autonomy? And which forms of support and training do teachers need? Okay, as well, I will skip literature review part, but for me the literature review part it is very well organized and also well written. Okay, it is mentioned in a very detailed manner. Okay, so I will skip literature review. Now I'll move on to methodology. So I will talk about design and instruments. Okay, so an online survey in the form of a cross-sectional questionnaire was designed. The questionnaire consists of closed yes or no and multiple choice as well as open questions. It is divided into 5 major sections. Section 1 contains demographic questions, including questions about the participant's age, gender, and country of work. The following section covers participants' online teaching situation and the amount and forms of training they had received in online teaching. So section 3 covers the concept of learner autonomy, particularly focusing on the participants' understanding of foreign language learner autonomy on the principles that implement in their own teaching. Section 4 investigates the respondents' perceived possibilities and limitations of developing learner autonomy in online teaching contexts. Section 5 then investigates the general benefits and constraints of online learning, also including questions on the kind of support participants currently receive and are expecting to receive in the future. The questionnaire was administered to a small group of 4 volunteers in form of a pilot study and was revised according to their feedback. Okay, so for me, I think this questionnaire is not very reliable or valid, because this questionnaire designed by the researchers, but then it only it was administered to a small group of 4 volunteers. So who are these 4 volunteers? It is not clearly mentioned. Are they expertise in the field? Are they just 4 random volunteers? Are they educated people? we have no idea. Okay, so for the pilot study, this is I think this is quite important to inform the um, readers whether the 4 volunteers are expertise or they are who are they. Okay, this have to be informed. Okay, so for the participants, there are 79 teachers completed the survey. However, only 92.4% or 73 participants of the original 79 participants moved to online teaching during the pandemic. 6 of them already work in online environments and or distance learning. Okay, so for the researchers, they want to find someone who switched from face-to-face to online environment. Okay, so these 6 participants who have experience working in online environments or even distance learning, they were eliminated or they were excluded. The answers of the 73 participants who moved to online teaching in relation to the pandemic were considered. Of these 73 participants, 45 were female, 23 male, and 5 preferred not to designate their gender. Participants were largely between 35 and 54 years old, with the majority of them being between 35 and 44 years old. Okay, so the 73 participants work in 22 different countries. The majority work in Germany with 29 participants, followed by Japan 12, Czech Republic 4, US 4, Finland 3, Spain 3, UK 2, Australia 2, and Brazil 2. The reason that almost half of all participants currently work in Germany and Japan is due to the fact that the authors of this article are both based in Germany and have a broad professional network in Japan. So 47 participants currently teaching English and the others teaching other languages. The majority of the participants work in tertiary education. The rest were teaching in secondary education and primary education. Okay, so for me, these participants, they are of varieties. Okay, they have 73 participants, but they came from 22 different countries. With some countries only have 2 or 3 participants. Okay, so my 2 cents, the researchers probably could just focus on Germany and Japan. Okay, because they can justify that Germany and Japan have the most participants due to the fact that they are based in Germany and they have broad professional network in Japan. So why not just focus in Germany and Japan? Okay, and or they can increase the participants. Okay, because 73 participants from 22 different countries, it sounds a little bit to me it sounds a little bit too less. Okay, so probably can find more participants from each country, or just focus on a few countries, like just focus on Japan and Germany. Yeah. So the survey was administered via Google Docs between the beginning of May and the beginning of July 2020. It was shared via social media networks and through personal email contacts. Participation in the study was voluntary and informed consent was obtained from all participants via an online consent form that was embedded in the survey. The online survey was conducted based on snowball sampling, with the intent of collecting as much data as possible. However, the data set cannot be considered representative or random. Though this procedure has limitations such as the lack of previous research, the insufficient sample size, and the context dependency of the data, the authors were interested in obtaining a snapshot of the situation that many language teachers were thrown into. Okay, so here it mentioned about snowball sampling, but then again, my 2 cents, increase the participants or just focus on the few countries that have more participants. Okay. Okay, data analysis. In total, the questionnaire contained 33 closed as well as 10 open-ended questions. In addition to the quantitative data, which was summarized during descriptive statistical methods, the open-ended questions were analyzed by identifying key themes and ideas using a grounded theory approach. Okay, so I assume this is a qualitative data. Okay, the nature of this study is qualitative. In an initial phase, the answers were coded using categories and words close to the participants' wording. In the second phase, more abstract and general codes were identified. Okay, so let's move on. The results and discussion. The results indicated that the shift to online learning has created spaces for teachers and students to become more autonomous, especially as the participating teachers considered autonomy one of the main affordances of online learning. The overall majority stated that they had become more of a mentor, guide, facilitator, provider, and involver. However, besides dealing with pedagogical aspects, providing motivational and emotional support was also mentioned as new roles in online teaching. Due to the fact that some teachers had not worked with technology in the classroom before, they relied on their learners' support. Thus, teachers have turned into co-learners, in terms of learning technology, and sharing knowledge and expertise had become a two-way process. So the teachers will provide knowledge, content knowledge, and then the student will provide the technological knowledge. Many respondents indicated that they saw providing emotional, psychological, and pastoral support as their main responsibilities in these times of emergency online instruction. So not so much on content knowledge, but more on this kind of emotional, psychological, pastoral support. The sudden shift to online teaching has led to a more dynamic and participatory engagement in the learning process, which create a community of practice in which learners engage in collaborative learning, share their experiences and ideas in a collaborative way, and are more open to peer feedback and assessment. This is according to some of the teachers. So it creates a better community of practice. The most frequently mentioned challenge was building and maintaining an interactive and collaborative learning environment for the students. The ways of informal training that teachers used show that many participants gave up their lone fighter status and tried to enter or even build communities of practice where they collectively question effective teaching routines, examine new conceptions of teaching and learning, find generative means to acknowledge and respond to difference and conflict, and engage in supporting one another's professional growth. So in this situation, I believe many teachers that are devastated. And especially it is first time. It is the first time engaging in this kind of online teaching and learning. So they were quite devastated. So what they can do, they have to build a stronger community of practice in order to strengthen themselves, their own teaching method. So that's all for the summary of second article. So basically I've already given my critiques, but now so now I will recap the strengths and weaknesses of both articles. The first article, the strengths are the problem statement, research questions, and research objective are clearly stated. Literature review is well organized and written. The experimental GRIPS flipped classroom instruction was well designed, which resulted in an enhancement of learner autonomy. All the research questions were discussed. Focus on learners. This article focuses on learners, and it employed mixed method approach. Sorry, typo there. It should be mixed. Mixed method approach. For me, I think mixed method approach is more is strong. It is stronger than maybe just quantitative or qualitative alone, because the data can be supported by, like in this article, the quantitative data is supported by the qualitative data. Okay, so the weaknesses, the title of the article does not reflect the quantitative design. The researcher is one of the instructors, which leads to data bias. Experimental and control group were both from the same course and same institution. This can cause data bias too. Yeah, this one I skipped too. Okay, so as mentioned, all the students were from the same institution, from the same course. Okay, so this can cause data bias because students probably they will chit chat with each other after the lessons. Okay, so there might be bias. Okay, sampling technique was not mentioned. Correlation between online learning activities and perceived learner autonomy was measured and reported, but it was not mentioned in the title nor in the research questions. For the second article, the strengths are the research background, problem statement, research objective, and research questions are clearly stated. 2. Okay, literature review is well organized and well written. I think I like the literature part in this second article more because it is more organized. All research questions were discussed. Detailed implications were deduced. Okay, in fact, the researcher included a very detailed implication, the pedagogical implication at the conclusion. Okay, and I like that part very much. It focuses on teachers rather than learners in the previous article. For the weakness, there were 73 participants from 22 different countries who taught different languages. In my opinion, it would be better to either increase the sampling size or focus on just a few countries or languages. This one I have already discussed. Could I have included limitations of the study to discuss all the limitations in one section. Okay, so that's all for my presentation. Thank you.